Nuclear weapons are single-handedly the most destructive thing we've ever created on this planet. But they've saved more lives than they have ever taken. And I'm gonna prove it to you in this video. And it seems pretty bigoted for me to make such a statement when the entire world in 1945 saw when 300,000 plus people got eviscerated off the face of the earth when the United States deployed the little boy and the fat man to Hiroshima and Nagasaki respectively. But that one act created an entire military doctrine on deterrence based on nuclear weapons. So let's get into what I'm talking about. Now, I'm by no means saying that this was a necessary evil, that this had to happen, that the United States had to drop two nuclear devices on these cities and kill over 300,000 Japanese civilians to end the Second World War. I'm saying that in August 1945, the United States opened Pandora's box, and it changed everything. However, it indirectly saved untold billions more from certain death. From about 1945 to 1949, you have the United States essentially with an unmatched, unchecked nuclear monopoly on the entire planet. That was the case until 1949, where the Soviets developed the RDS-1, or First Lightning. So this was their nuclear device, their first nuclear device actually, and they tested it. And now the monopoly of the US is broken. So now you have two nuclear superpowers, essentially, that are comparable in strength, depending on who you ask, right? That they're both armed with these weapons, and they're able to develop more. Not only that, this is at a point in history where bombers, aircraft, are a proven method of delivering these nuclear weapons. And this is also at a point in history where rocket technology is like a new thing. It's just been developed and it's been proven. You saw this with the Nazis, right? They had the V2 rocket, and even at the Battle of Berlin, the Soviets deployed the Katyusha platform, which was basically a truck-mounted missile launcher, and they launched over 3,200 of these into the city to overwhelm the Germans. So, at this point in history, things aren't looking good, right? Like, it's kind of gonna get out of hand. But however, this is where the point of what I was saying in the intro actually comes into play. So, by the 50s and 60s, the United States and the USSR, they have nuclear rockets, right? They got the rocket engines and they got the warheads mounted in the rockets. So it's not as easy to wage the Cold War against your rival when they also have nuclear weapons. Why? Because of something called MAD, or mutually assured destruction. So this basically means that, say the Russians, right, they fire a nuclear weapon at Washington. The Americans are going to respond by launching like 27 missiles out Moscow, right? So it's going to be this cascade of violence. So this is the point of what I'm saying. This MAD, this mutually assured destruction, is what is saving so many lives today. And I'll give you some examples throughout history, and maybe I'll give like some modern ones as well. But let's continue. In October 1962, the United States and the USSR were engaged in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And what the United States had done is they quarantined the island, because you can't say blockade and then because it's an act of war. So they quarantined the island, and the US Navy basically was stopping ships going through, because they knew that the USSR was sending cargo ships with like Soviet personnel, advisors, military equipment, etc. onto Cuba. So they wanted to stop that. And they were getting a bit nervous because they were putting nuclear weapons in Cuba. So what happens is there's this submarine underneath, and the U.S. Navy, they see it and they drop some charges, some mines on it to like warn them, like surface right now because we see you and you're not going through these waters. So there's this bloke on the submarine. His name's Vasily Arkhipov. I think I pronounced that wrong. Whatever his name is. This bloke single-handedly saved the world. Why? Because of MAD. I'll tell you why. So what happens is they drop the mines. The captain and the political officer aboard the submarine, they believe war has already broken out. They believe the United States and the USSR there's war already happening. So they think the Navy is actually engaging them to destroy the submarine. And the way it works on a submarine, because it was a nuclear-armed submarine, is all three, the Vasily, the captain, and the political officer, all of them have to agree to launch their nuclear payloads, right? And if one of them disagrees, then they're not going to fire. So the US Navy drops these mines, and it rattles the sub. So they think war's broken out. So the captain and the political officer, they're like, okay, that's it, war's broken out. We gotta do this. Vasily, in his intuition kicks in, right? He's like, this something's off, like, you know. So he like uses his better judgment, and he says, no, we're not gonna fire. So had he turned the key that day and agreed with his comrades, they would have launched these nuclear weapons and kickstarted nuclear war, because the Americans would have seen this, and then they would have just launched everything they had at the USSR, and in vice versa, they would have launched everything they had in response. So you could reason that Vasily saved the world. The point is, right, if you know the stakes, if you know what it's going to cost to launch a nuclear device, you're not going to risk firing one unless absolutely necessary. And this is why countries today, they do not fire nuclear weapons unless they are fired upon with nuclear weapons first. This is actually China's policy with nuclear weapons. They do not fire. They even said, we are not going to fire, but if we are fired upon, we will return fire. Something like that, right? It's actually called the NFU, or the no first use policy. So Beijing isn't going to launch something at Washington or London unless they are fired upon first. Now, that's one aspect of mutually assured destruction, protecting everyone, like saving lives, because no one is willing to risk having everything destroyed, having the entire world burnt down over geopolitical disagreements, right? So no one's going to launch nuclear weapons at other nuclear powered states, because they know they're gonna get destroyed as well in the process, or they're gonna get severely damaged even if they lose the least. The other thing is nuclear threshold states. So we'll take Iran, for example. Currently, Iran has around 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. So it has been proven that they can enrich up to 60%. You need at least 90% for weapons grade. So in terms of civilian use, Iran, or not Iran, just countries in general, it's around 5 to 10% for like most nuclear reactors. And then you have around like 60% for like medical stuff like MRI. I don't really know. I just know it has something to do with medical stuff. And then you have weapons grade, which is at 90 plus. So the reason why the Americans and the Israelis don't just launch nuclear weapons at Israel, destroy Natanz, Fordo, Isfahan, glass Tehran, decapitate all the leadership, is actually a few reasons. One, the Iranians have a decentralized leadership with built-in redundant systems in place. So they have marching orders. So I bet all the commanders, all the generals, all the military people, even the scientists and everyone, they have planned for this comprehensively, right? So they have this uranium. No one knows where it is. No one knows where it could be. In the east. It could be under the mountains. We don't know. The Israelis aren't willing to gamble that the end of the world yet, because who's to say that they destroy these nuclear facilities and Tehran and other cities, and they don't just be like, okay, wait like 6 to 7 months, and we're going to make our own nuclear weapon, and we're going to annihilate you. That's it. And it's not like they can just decapitate the government, right? Because when they killed Khomeini, he had like a successor already planned. And that guy has like successors in place. And all those guys have successors. All the commanders, all the generals, all the leaders of civilian institutions and the parliament and the council of experts, they all have people ready to go. So it's not like you can just destroy the capital and the government falls, the people rise up, and then Raza Pahlavi comes in and ruins everything again. It's more so, who's to say that these people in Iran, these high-level leadership in Iran, who's to say that if they use a nuclear weapon on us, then activate the gas centrifuges, activate all the equipment, we're going to make a nuclear weapon, and we're going to deploy it. And these guys have hypersonics, right? These guys have hypersonics. And they have Russian and Chinese satellite intelligence. They have their own in-house missile and drone manufacturing hubs. So there's a lot to gamble. So even with non-nuclear powers or with threshold states, mutually assured destruction still comes into play, because we don't know. Because who's to say, maybe we topple the government now, but who's to say in 2-3 years, they'll deploy a nuclear weapon on us for revenge? Because it's not like a strategy game where you can just like genocide and kill and kill and kill, and then you have like the in-game mechanics to fall back on. If strategy games were more realistic, diplomacy, espionage, and political opinion would be way more important. So the idea is this: you can't launch nuclear weapons at a nuclear power because you and your country will be destroyed. You can't launch them at nuclear threshold states because who's to say they won't develop their own nuclear weapons in retaliation for what you did? Or who's to say their allies or other allies or other powers in the region won't let you get away with that because it will set a dangerous precedent. And that's the thing, right? You can't just let another nation get away with deploying nuclear weapons because you will embolden the enemy. Just like Trump in Venezuela, he went in, he done one of the most sophisticated military operations in the 21st century. I'll give him that. He conducted that. He took Maduro. Now he's in a prison in New York. And why wouldn't, if I was a world leader, right? If I was a world leader and I got away with doing something like that, blatantly violating international law, bypassing Congress, of course I would have launched a war in Iran. Now there's a lot of nuance to Venezuela and Iran because they need to fall back on Venezuelan oil reserves when things go sideways, as they have. So launching weapons without launching, it's like normal geopolitics, right? Russia invades Ukraine. What happens? They get sanctioned even harder. They get kicked out of the Olympics, not that anyone cares. They get globally demonized by the media. Imagine Russia drops a nuclear weapon on Kiev. What happens next? Well, full Cold War propaganda. We need to defeat the Red Menace. The draft is gonna get kicked into play because when you have nuclear powers that are using nuclear weapons on a regular basis, suddenly the whole planet is in an existential angst. So these countries would form coalitions or federations, or they would form blocks, or they'd sanction and stop trade. So there's so much to gamble by losing. By using nuclear weapons, because you won't just be isolated politically, you'd be isolated economically. Suddenly China's not going to trade with you. The Gulf states they're not going to send you oil. I'm not saying like for this in the case of Russia, just if you're just a country and you're acting with such belligerence, right? Like the US is going to use their somewhat weaken the global hegemony to pressure their allies to stop doing business with you. So there is a lot to risk, and this is why when nuclear war or the potential of it is brought up, you don't panic, because contrary to popular belief, the statistics and the data as to what would happen in a nuclear war, they're based on 1980s Cold War projections. The global arsenal back in the height of the Cold War was like 70,000. It's like 7,000 now, give or take, or like 13,000. I could be wrong, but it's way less than what it used to be because of the nuclear reduction treaties that these powers have signed. So it's not as scary as you think. So it's not like if a nuclear war breaks out, it's not going to turn into fallout and there's ghouls everywhere and the entire world is destroyed. Most likely or not, if a nuclear war does happen, it's either going to be conventional to an extent, and the global south is going to be fine. Right? Like, outside of a few targets and probably US military bases, what strategic importance is it to drop nuclear weapons, say, on Sydney, right? Makes no sense, right? It makes no sense. So, nuclear warfare is just a boogie, man. There are people out there who say nuclear weapons aren't even real. I don't even know if that's true. I don't think it's true. It doesn't make sense to me anyway. Point is, civilization's not going to end overnight. And the mutually assured destruction has actually created a new term. Well, not necessarily something new, but it's been done before. But it's happening way more, right? It's called proxy warfare. So essentially, the United States, for an example, the United States, instead of fighting the Russians directly, what do? They send equipment, weapons, advisors, maybe even like some volunteers to Ukraine. So the Ukrainians can fight the Russians. So the Americans are fighting Russia through Ukraine, right? Another example would be Vietnam, right? The Russians and the United States didn't fight directly, but the Soviets and the Chinese were backing the North Vietnamese, and the Americans went in to fight them. So the communists were fighting the capitalists through the NVA. Even today, China and Russia are fighting America through Iran, or Iran is fighting Israel through Hezbollah, through the Houthis, through the Iraqi militias. Proxy warfare is so common. It's everywhere. And because of mutually assured destruction. Because like I said, no one's willing to risk it. So what are they going to do? They're going to fight their enemies through conventional warfare, through puppets. This is why you hear the term American puppet, Soviet puppet, or puppet government. Because everybody knows that, say, Ukraine is just getting funding from the Americans, or the Germans, or the British. So proxy warfare is a direct cause, a direct creation that was made from mutually assured destruction. Even though proxy warfare has happened in the past, it's nowhere near as prevalent as it is right now in history. And as a result of proxy warfare, a lot of people have been killed. A lot of people have been killed by the RSF, by Ukraine, by Russia, by other militant groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Iraqi militias, whoever, right? A lot of innocent people get caught in the crossfire. And a fair criticism of what I'm saying is that nuclear weapons are devastating. But what about all the people that get killed, that have been killed in the past like 50, 60, 70 years in conventional warfare? Like what about Vietnam and Korea, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Algeria, and so on and so on and so on? Like surely all those deaths would add up. But those are deaths over the scale of like 70 years, for example. And they are tragic. Any innocent life lost is tragic, right? In any war, in any country, it is tragic. The thing is, when an army goes out of its way to kill a bunch of civilians, it does that out of its own free will. A nuclear weapon, first of all, has no will, but it's also indiscriminate. And that's why nuclear weapons are so devastating, because the people will get killed by the initial blast, then the shockwave, then the fallout, then the collapse of civil infrastructure, the lack of emergency services and first response units. So nuclear weapons, one nuclear detonation in Lahore, Pakistan, is more deadly than the whole Iraq war. That's my point. And our world leaders know this, so that's why they're so afraid to use them. That's why this Russia-Ukraine's been going on for 4 years. That's why Israel hasn't turned Iran to glass yet, because there is so much more to risk. And that's basically my overall point, everyone. The fear of destroying everything is what is keeping people, or our world leaders, from destroying each other. And this is indirectly saving a lot of lives across the planet. Not that our leaders are so benevolent. I think a lot of them are stupid. But the threat of destruction is what is stopping our destruction. And this is why nuclear weapons have killed far less people than any conventional conflict. And that's basically it. That's all I have to say for today's video. Guys, let me know what you thought of this video. Was this something insightful? Was this educational? If you guys agree with me, let me know in the comments. If you disagree with me, I'd like to hear your guys' opinion. And yeah, that's basically it. Nuclear weapons have saved more lives than they have taken. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for sticking around for this long. And subscribe to my new channel. I'm working on more videos. I hope you guys enjoyed the commentary and the analysis, or whatever it was. But yeah. I'll see you guys in the next one.